Hey the berries, it's that time of year again where we're looking at the start of the new season support champions and analyzing and working out which ones are kind of the standout ones so far. So this is patch 11.1, season 11, but Riot are pretty adamant about calling this season 2021. So we'll go with that theme, so season 2021. So if you're familiar with the tier list that we have done in the past, I go through 5 different tiers of support champions. We kind of analyze each patch, which ones are getting better, which ones getting worse, which ones are just still the same, and then you can work out what you want to use in your solo queue games. The way that I work these tier lists out is from my own personal experience in solo queue, plus a little bit of dabbling around in terms of other people's gameplays and just a general feel of pro play picks as well. We've got professional play happening extremely soon, just right around the corner, and the season officially starts. If you're not sure, it starts on Friday, so that's when the grind officially begins for patch 11.1. Now in this patch there were a lot of changes to mythic items and stat redistribution, plus the passives basically generally being nerfed and the stats on the item generally being buffed. And in terms of the support stuff, it's actually the exception to that rule. So Imperial Mandate, the second part of the destination, has been nerfed heavily. That's it. Imperial Mandate has just been honestly crushed. The damage output of that will now be basically halved overall on the passive. Then we're looking at Moonstone. That's getting a flat buff of just over 10%, so extra 10% healing on your Moonstone. And then Shreddiers is getting a buff as well. Honestly, I don't think many people or any people picked up Shreddiers. It's getting a movement speed buff of 20%. I don't feel like that is necessarily the right move in terms of buffing. I'm still not sure who's going to be picking that up because the actual raw stats on Shreddiers are pretty weak compared to something like Moonstone. Also, Grievous Wounds has been buffed slightly, an extra second, I believe, in all duration of Grievous Wounds, such as Thormail and Executioners, and the Oblivion Orb. So if you are playing a champion that heals a lot or is utilizing Moonstone a lot, then there is a slight nerf there as well. Overall, Assassin physical damage has gone down a lot, so if you're playing a squishy support, you're going to be surviving a little bit longer, which in turn basically buffs Moonstone. So Moonstone works better the longer the fights go on. So the longer the team fight's going on, the more Moonstone procs you get off equals the more healing. So as you can see, there's direct buffs to Moonstone. Grievous Wounds buff nerfs it, but it's now able to be used longer in fights. So overall, in my opinion, Moonstone got buffed. Imperial Mandate massively nerfed. Shreddiers minor buff. But I would still put the mythic order for most champions will now probably be Moonstone, Imperial Mandate, and then Shreddiers at the bottom. I think Imperial Mandate is still going to be considerably stronger than Shreddiers because of the stat allocation. Now, if you're already liking this this tier list and where it's going in terms of the information that you're getting, make sure you press the subscribe button. We'll be doing these tier lists every 2 weeks. But without further ado, let's start talking about the champions going into 11.1. Tier 5 is basically like the no-go zone. Only do these in like your ultra, for fun normals, and if you have fun doing that, then that's awesome. But this tier list is primarily for ranked, and I wouldn't advise you playing any of the champions in tier 5, even if you play them in a solo lane. So say if you're a top lane player or a mid lane player and you're coming down into the support role, I wouldn't recommend you bring down your Annie or your Teemos. Okay. Looking at the tier 4, so moving up steadily. I don't want to get too hitched down on the reasoning on each individual why those champions shouldn't be played. You just have to trust me for this one. So tier 4, we have the Anivia, Taric, Trundle, Gragas, Set, Maokai, Shaco, Shan, Poppy, Tom Kench, and Galio. Now, originally in the previous tier list, about 3-4 weeks ago, during preseason, Anivia was tier 3. She was actually really strong. She's getting a direct nerf on her E damage, which is basically a 20 damage nerf, if you include the fact that the target is frozen. Plus, Imperial Mandate is getting nerfed. Basically, a lot of champions here that use Imperial Mandate are going to be like generally nudged down, generally. So yeah, Nivea used Imperial Mandate as well, so her power has gone down quite a fair chunk going into that mid game onwards. So, I mean, you have some tools there still, but overall, I wouldn't say it's worth it. Also, talking about the Imperial Mandate, the Maokai, and potentially the Shaco, if you're using Imperial Mandate on AP Shaco as support, those have obviously been nerfed as well. So, Maokai's E is going to be not as devastating if you get caught out by a couple of those later on into the game. Some champions that just really haven't budged from this area for a long time, like Tarek, for example, Trundle, Gragas. These sort of champions are okay to play if you've been playing them a lot elsewhere, like the Gragas and the Trundle, the Shen and the Poppy, and even the Galio. I think Galio did receive some changes this patch, but nothing, no real reason to move him from tier 4. I think they're okay to play if you're coming into the support role and want to learn it, and you want some champion familiarity. I said that word first time. Nice. Very proud of myself. But generally, like these champions in tier 4 are like, if you want to come in from a different role and learn support, these champions here are okay as a starting point, because everyone's got to start somewhere, right? Moving on to tier 3. There we go. We've got tier 3. We've got Brand, Senna, Bard, Soraka, Pike, Rakan, Alistair, Xerath, Vel'Koz, Zillion, Nautilus, and Brom. Brom I originally had in tier 4. He's been nudged up a little bit. In terms of champion placements, I believe Brand was in tier 2, and I've nudged him down into tier 3 a little bit. These champions are viable. I'd say if you are in low plat minus, then these tier 3s can potentially be as strong as anything in tier 2. In extreme circumstances, maybe into tier 1 kind of category. These kind of picks are, in terms of like high ELO reasoning, are extremely niche. And there are very small circumstances that you'd want to take them. So for example, if you wanted to take Soraka right now, you'd be taking her mainly just for the silence, and say you wanted to stop a Rammus or a Nunu ganking your lane. The silence would interrupt like the snowball or the powerball on Rammus, and are quite nice tools. And say if they had a Katarina in the mid lane, that's what silence is, obviously instant, so it's a really good interrupt for like some very specific cases. Senna, for example, is really good if you have an AP carry in the bot lane, something like a Swain or pretty much anything AP carry, Heimerdinger, a Syndra. Gives your team basically an AD, and Senna can still do quite nice damage. So that, as you can see, like, Brand really good if there's loads of tanks on the enemy team. Bard can be good, particularly if you're really good mechanically, that nudges him up slightly. But also Imperial Mandate got nerfed, so he didn't get to tier 2 on this patch, in my opinion. Pike as well, if you're really good at roaming, his ult can give a load of gold over to your team, talking about 2,000-3,000 gold for free. And Alistair really good for roaming. Same with Rakan, kind of nice pairing with Xayah. Xayah had a little buff this patch, I believe. And then you've got some of the APs sometimes if you need to fill in that AP on your team, if you're lacking AP on your team and the enemy team has a couple of tanks, something like the Vel'Koz or the Xerath could be quite nice. Nautilus is he's okay. He's just nothing exceptional, but like if you've got a Kaiser in your team, she works really well with Nautilus because Kaiser does basically more damage, the more crowd control effects that you can get onto a target because of her passive. So there's some nice link up there, or like with a Yasuo with the Nautilus's ulti, you can easily set up Yasuo on a really squishy target if you want to do it that way. Or if you're playing with like a Lucian, so that Brom would work out really nicely with you still, but that kind of pairing with Lucian Brom is quite rare in the bot lane since Lucian's used mid, but there are some cases where Brom can be quite useful if there's an Ornn ulti on the enemy team. So as you can see, that there's specific cases where each of these champions can be relevant. I know I can't miss Zillion now. He's alright. He's got clocks. It's great. But each one of these champions has like a specific case scenario. So if you don't care about that and you just want to one trick one of these, that's fine. You could probably get to Diamond Plus eventually one tricking any one of these champions. The Senna would probably be the hardest to one trick here because she is so vulnerable and really only excels with an AP on the team, but it really does show when that happens, if an AP in the bot lane, that is. But all of these champions can be played. That's what I want to make clear. These champions are viable, but there are champions better than them and better than them in more cases and more situations. So if you're really looking for something to one trick, then I'd ideally advise you to look at something at tier 2 and tier 1, which we're looking at now. So let's scroll up to tier 2. So tier 2, we've got the Blitzcrank that I'm sure everyone loves. Karma, we got Swain, Morgana, Sona, Seraphine, Nami, and Yumi. So Nami was originally tier 1. I want to just mention this straight away. Like, Nami was tier 1. I'm theorizing that this Imperial Mandate on Nami is, well, I mean, anyone that used an Imperial Mandate, like the Seraphine, like the Nami, have been affected, but I think Nami was like the best user of Imperial Mandate as support. Now that like everything about her, this patch has been nerfed. Imperial Mandate's been nerfed. Her healing has been nerfed because of the Grievous Wounds buff. You might want to resort into Moonstone now. So she generally plays better in a more aggressive playstyle. And now we've kind of been nudged into a more of a passive playstyle for this patch, which I'm personally not too happy with. Moonstone is going to encourage making sure that you're in combat in the safest way possible. Nami can kind of stay in combat like that with E buffs on friendly targets, so Moonstone is potentially a viable option on her, but Imperial Mandate was kind of the better option. I think the coin toss between the two on someone like Nami is think about how many assassins there are on the enemy team. If the enemy team has at least 2 assassins, go Imperial Mandate. Because you won't get the duration that you need from the Moonstone, and fights will be ending too quickly for you to get as many procs as possible from Moonstone. So that's kind of like what you're looking for here. So Imperial Mandate's still probably on Nami in most cases if there is no assassin on the enemy team. So that is generally my thoughts on it. But you know, you could probably just get away with Moonstone every single game if you really wanted to, especially since it's got buffed again for this patch, for this season. So there's some users here that really excel actually with Moonstone. Yumi has always been really good with Moonstone. The champion herself is kind of like a little bit coin flip dependent on how good your AD carry is. But hopefully you've got one person on your team that you can attach to mid game. Moonstone numbers on Yumi are insane, probably one of the highest, if not the highest on all the supports. It's just the reason why she's not up higher is because her playstyle and her kit is very coin flip, very reliant on your teams doing a lot. But if you've got the games this season just to drag it out, say if you can do 2,000 solo queue games all on Yumi, I'm sure most people would probably actually legitimately get to Diamond. But it is coin flip. You gotta work through the coin flips. You'll probably end up on something like a 51%, 52% win rate overall. But that'll take a lot of time. But you could probably eventually get to there at that point. But most people, I guess, would probably find that incredibly boring. Blitzcrank, you know, lower ELO for sure, like gold minus, you know, everyone hates Blitzcrank, loads of people ban Blitzcrank, he's very deadly there. Once you move up into what you would call high ELO, maybe like Diamond Plus, Blitzcrank is pretty rare to see, but he is still pretty scary in high ELO. When he does get picked, you still have to respect it. So yeah, just a general like really annoying pick in solo queue. Karma, I believe, received a minor buff on her shield on the later points, so it's an extra little loving for her there. She can generally use Moonstone relatively okay. So if you want to go down that route, that's fine. I wouldn't recommend Imperial Mandate. Shrillia's on her would probably be the most interesting out of all the champions, with Mantra E and then just popping the Shrillia's at the same time. Be kind of interesting what kind of movement speed numbers we could hit with that, but it comes into a case where it's like your team really needs that extra engage, but it could work. It could actually work. AP Swain is starting to make its way back in. He did use Imperial Mandate though, so we'll make this clear. This is like a tier 2.5 for him. I just don't have a slot for that. He can very easily be tier 2 or tier 3. I'd probably say this is one of my more risky placements here in the tier list. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt just because of how cheesy he is. It was really weird. He when I recommended him ages ago, people started playing him. And then I stopped recommending him, and I've noticed actually a decline in play rate. I'm going to see. This is more of a test. Moving up into tier 2 and see if the play rate increases. So, yeah. Swain was my cheesy pick for people in Season 10. I'm still going to stick with it. Cheesy pick for the start of Season 11 if you want to get out your some of those placement games wins maybe. Swain could be a very nice option, especially if you've got a more bursty AD carry. Early in the laning phase and you're up against some squishy supports. Morgana tier 2 can actually utilize Moonstone. You don't have to put points in W. Well, you put 1 point in W. You don't have to go further than that. Just max range W tapping people just to so that you're in combat so your Moonstone procs keep ticking over. Black Shield is generally, useful in a lot of situations. Bindings last a year. The only downside, the main downside, the reason why she wouldn't be like tier 1 is because of her ultimate. Her ultimate's absolutely, well, I wouldn't say absolutely garbage, but it's like garbage in a lot of situations. So it's a shame she has a melee range ulti, but her Q and the binding and the shield are generally solid takes, so viable for the entirety of the ladder, no matter what kind of ranking you are. Sona and Seraphine are both very, very squishy. They're similar, but not similar. I would say the thing is, so let's talk about Seraphine. Seraphine's QWE are annoying in lane, but the main thing is her ultimate. Like most of her abilities just fall off mid-game out of that laning phase, but her ultimate can be literally game-changing. It's so strong that's the only reason why she's in tier 2. Like in laning phase, yes, her E and her Q are very good harassment tools, better than Sona's harassing in the lane, but then later on in the game you got to be focusing 100% on positioning and getting the best ultimate off, and sometimes that can be a real pain, but it can pay off. Sona, on the other hand, you don't really need to worry about positioning early in the laning phase, and your damage isn't going to be that great, but later on, once you hit level 11 onwards, your positioning doesn't have to be as on point as Seraphine in terms of like getting that absolute perfect ulti off. You can just run around and just spam your QWE all the time in fights, and that will give you a lot of impact and will also activate Moonstone a lot in fights. Ulti as well is like Seraphine's, but it's just shorter range, I guess, but it can have some decent effects, but most of the stuff that you'll be doing will be Staff of Flowing, water, buffing everybody, potentially Ardent Sensor as well, maybe, and just constantly shielding, movement speed, and buffing people's damage up minorly as well. It's just really, really, really nice if you can make that mid-game onward stage. Now that we talked through everyone that's tier 2, let's have a look at the tier 1s. I think for the first time, we've had 6 champions in tier 1. I could be lying. I'm sure someone might correct me. But I don't recall the last time I put 6 people in tier 1. I will say I feel like this patch for supporters at least, there isn't really one champion in my opinion that is really like excelling now that Imperial Mandate's got kicked in the area that shall not be named. So Zyra used Imperial Mandate, so did Lux, so did Janna. I believe some people took it on Lulu. So the interesting thing here is that Zyra, I feel like, is still extremely strong. Is one of the best blind picks that you can do in champion selection, in my opinion, especially if you have no AP on the team. If people are already hovering picks, I think Zyra is very good in the laning phase. I think Zyra is good in mid game onwards, and objective control can be extremely strong. That's why she's there. You can self carry, as some people might be asking, like, you know, what are some of the self carry supports. You're looking at like the Zyra and Lux are kind of those champions where you kind of get a lot more kills and you kind of like get solo kills and stuff playing support. Zyra is one of those champions. So yeah, nothing really too much to talk about that. I mean, Imperial Mandate is still an option. I would take Imperial Mandate if there are multiple assassins on the enemy team and you just need to get a kill in quickly. Otherwise, Liandry's is going to be better. I'm like 85% sure on that. So it's going to be an Imperial Mandate or a Liandry's. Now, Liandry's is obviously way more expensive than Imperial Mandate, but it's going to be worth it if there's a couple of high health targets on the enemy team. Get Demonic Embrace on top of that with the Liandry's and you'll be top on damage for sure on your team. So that is like the build you're kind of looking towards. On Zyra, still fairly similar to what it was in preseason. Let's talk about Lux. Let's just skip over Leon. Let's go into Lux because we're still talking about AP. I think once again it's a sort of similar situation. If you need to kill people quickly, Imperial Mandate is an option, but I wouldn't do Liandry's on Lux. I would do something like a Night Harvester on her and get that burst damage through. You could, if you're doing really well in the laning phase, and you're still up against assassins, you could still do a Night Harvester if you really wish, but an Imperial Mandate plus a Zhonya's might be a better option on Lux. Depends on how greedy you're feeling. But yeah, well, Lux is a really good pick. You know, if you got poke AD carry, poke with Lux, it's really, really strong. Not really too many downsides. Her laning phase is generally pretty safe. Her range and her spells are really, really far. But if you do get caught out, you're really squishy. But that honestly, that happens quite rarely on her. So yeah, I think she's just quite solid across the board. And if you can get to like level 16 on her, then her ult's on a ridiculously low cooldown, and you can start even just using that to poke before a fight even starts. So Lux in general, I feel is pretty good right now. Now we've got two tanks now in tier 1. We'll talk about Leona and Thresh and then move on to the enchanters. So Leona is the most standout tank. She's been very strong for a really long time. Locket would be the only thing that I would be taking on her. I think Locket is fine. It's a kind of a shame that this tank items are kind of boring compared to the other roles. But Locket Leona is going to be absolutely fine. She's very tanky, just got a lot of crowd control, very easy to play. Honestly, if you want to play a tank, then you're looking at Leona like 80 to 90% of the time. I wouldn't be surprised if her ban rate gradually increases still. I know she gets banned quite often, more than most of the other supports. Maybe Blitzcrank gets banned more than Leona. But like Leona is definitely up there and very strong picks. Her damage is honestly actually a little bit too much for what she does. But yep, that's it. Actually, you know, talking about tanks, I don't have Rel on this list. I really just realized I've completely forgotten that champion even exists. Yeah, she's not doing too great. Let's just briefly mention her now. Like, Rel's not doing too great at all. If I would have to place her, I'd put her in tier 4. She needs some urgent attention, and Riot basically released a new champion and didn't issue any buffs or changes to her during that time, but she is in need of some sort of movements buff on her W. So before the YouTube comment section goes crazy at me, Rel, do not advise playing that champion. Her kit overall looks really nice, but in practice, with the movement speed crutch that she has, it basically it stops her from actually doing anything. But I'm sure they'll change it in the coming weeks and stuff for sure. Now back onto the tanks. In tier 1, Thresh. Thresh, really solid pick. The only downside that I would say, particularly if you're like in Iron to Silver, is that people might not click your lanterns. But if you're really good mechanically, then Q, the hook, and the flay are going to be extremely good tools for you. Particularly if there's champions that have dashes like a Tristana, or like a I was just thinking like Lucian dash, but it's not too crazy. But you get my kind of thought here. Like if the enemy has dashes, Flay's extremely strong against that. And you know, hooks are generally like pretty decent anyway in League in terms of pick potential. So Thresh is just like overall like more mechanically intense than Blitzcrank, but there's a high skill ceiling, but a high reward most of the time, at least anyway. Now the enchanters, well, we were talking about how Grievous Wounds getting buffed. These champions aren't really affected by that. Yeah, the Janna ult heals, but it's not the primary reason why you ult on Janna. It's more of a disengage. Lulu as well is not affected by the Grievous Wounds, so that's great already. Neither champion really greatly excelled in Imperial Mandate. You could probably argue that Janna was okay with it, but I think both champions could do okay with a Moonstone. In particular, Lulu would probably excel quite well with a Moonstone, and honestly these champions are just generally like pretty stable anyway. I would probably take the Lulu if you needed that auto attack steroid. Otherwise I would just take the Janna every other time, because I think like unless like Janna's like banned or Lulu's banned, then you just take one or the other. But like I think in terms of enchanter picks right now, like the Lulu and the Janna are like looking the smartest picks right now. You can blind pick those. You won't really get countered if you take either of them. If you maybe take Janna, you might be up against, there's a chance you might get countered via something like a Zyra or a Nami. But later on in the game, when you need those disengages, like that's going to become particularly quite strong, especially with all the aggressive junglers being played all the time. So yeah, my enchanter picks are definitely the Janna and the Lulu right now. I think you can't really go too wrong with those. I think Lulu shields are particularly strong in the laning phase. They block pretty much every skill shot in terms of damage, and the shield is quite cheap. And Janna has the two options. She can play really passive in the lane if she wants to, and then it's just frustrating for the enemy because you're not putting yourself at risk. Or if there are opportunities in some laning phases that you might be able to harass and DPS and go in for poke with your spell thieves and your W harassment, with the Zephyr, Janna is able to do that too. So you've got two kind of like different play styles. Honestly, in both champions, you can both play extremely passive and just frustrate the enemy, or you can do the opposite. You can be very aggressive and you can change it up depending on what you're up against. Now I hope this tier list has helped you out. In the very near future, we're going to have a champion, calling it a champion guide, but it's like an insight of what I do in champion selection. So if you're interested in that video coming out in the next day or two, then make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and you'll get that video in your feed. But I wish you all the best in season 2021. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me live on stream at twitch.tv/Bizzleberry. Drop a comment down below if you wish, but I might not get an answer to you as quickly as I would do if I was live. Or you could even ask on the Discord, discord.gg/Bizzleberry. Just make sure you follow the verification rules. And then, yeah, I think we've got like 2,500 berries on the Discord. Most people there are support mains, so if I'm not around, I'm sure someone as wise as me, if that's even possible, will be able to help you out. And yeah, hopefully your solo queue climb goes well. I'll be doing another patch tier list for 11.2 and 11.3 and 11.4. So if you want to make sure you're up to date and playing the most relevant champions in solo queue, make sure you once again subscribe and get those tier list videos, and so you're all up to date and yeah, playing the best possible that you can, so you can get the most amount of LP in the shortest amount of time. Well, I hope this video helps you out, and don't forget to stay very awesome, and I'll see you for another video very, very soon. Take care.